Hello, my name's Kate and I'm a mother of two. I am a wilderness guide of 20 years and I am a storyteller. I've been doing some work with motherhood, rites and rituals, and the one thing that I really felt called to do is to tell this story of Inanna. There's a few that I was able to find, and I felt like I wanted something a little bit more in depth. I did some research into this ancient Sumerian myth, and what follows is my interpretation thereof. A little bit about the myth of Inanna. It is a story about a woman's descent into the underworld. It is the oldest recorded myth, and it is 4,000 years old. This descent holds a lot of power as a myth and story in my life. I have been on many journeys into the underworld, none so visceral and real and dismembering as motherhood. And so I often turn to this story for solace and almost like a roadmap when I feel lost. So I hope that you can find yourself in this journey and allow yourself to be open to receive whatever medicine the story has for you today. The story of Inanna's descent. Inanna was queen of heaven and earth. She was free to roam wherever she may. She was welcome in all places. Some say she was a fertile goddess dressed in white flowing robes, and others say she had a crown on her head dressed in flowers. She was welcome with all people in all lands. She was indeed the queen of heaven and earth. And one day, from the great above, she opened her ear to the great below, and she began to feel, even in her bones, the soft and subtle call of the great below. And she went about her days, visiting many people, other villages, heavens, the earth. But she could not ignore this call. And one day she turned her ear to the ground. And this thing that she could feel in her bones now felt like a loud roar in her ears. She could no longer ignore it. And the calling became louder and louder. And we're not entirely sure why she went, but she knew she must go. And as she knew she had to head to this underworld, this unknown place, she gathered together her gifts, the things that would protect her. She put on her crown. It represented her rule over many worlds. She arranged her dark hair across her forehead, and she strung small lapis beads around her neck. She wore her breastplate and her royal robe, and she adorned her special eye ointment called "Let Him Come, Let Him Come." She placed a gold ring on her wrist, and she took her lapis rod and measure, and she set out for the underworld. Ninshabur, her faithful servant, tried to talk her out of it. She was sure that she would come to death if she head into the underworld. All others had. But Inanna was not straying from her conviction. And she said, "Ninshabur, I must go this alone. I know you are scared, and so am I. But you need to wait here. And if after 3 days I do not return, you must set up an altar and lament, beat the drum, and then you must go seek out the elders. Ask them if they will help. I'm sure that Enki, the god of wisdom, will help. And sure enough, Ninshubur agreed. And Inanna set out on her journey alone into the underworld. She's not sure how long she traveled, but when she arrived at the outer gate, she knocked loudly, and she asked the gatekeeper to let her in. And he asks, why? She says, I am here to witness. And the gatekeeper goes to Ereshkigal, the queen of the underworld, Inanna's sister. And he tells her of her arrival at the first gate. And Ereshkigal, upon hearing of this, she slapped her thigh and she bit her lip. Ereshkigal tells the gatekeeper to allow Inanna in through each gate. But before passing through, she needs to remove one of her royal garments. And so Inanna moves from gate to gate, not wanting to relinquish each item, her crown. Next gate, her lapis beads. Next gate, her breastplate. And each time relinquishing them reluctantly and asking why. And the gatekeeper replied, the ways of the underworld are perfect. They must not be questioned. And so she gave up each of these gifts, these items that told of her status in society, of her reign and her sovereignty. And as Inanna passed through the last gate and removed her royal robe, having given up all other things, she entered this dark space, low and humble, naked. She could hear through the darkness a deep moaning. Ho, ho, ho. And Ereshkigal rose from her throne, and as Inanna started towards her, she was surrounded by great darkness. And the two sisters that had once looked upon each other, Ereshkigal fastened her eye of death upon Inanna. And Inanna was turned into a corpse, a piece of rotting meat, and she was hung from a hook on the wall. And here for 3 days she remained, suspended between this world and that. And back in the upper worlds, Ninshubur is at the lament. She's lighting candles and saying prayers. And 3 days passes. And so she went to the wise elders, and she asked the first two, and they refused. They said, Inanna got herself into this, she will get herself out. But Ninshubur persisted, and finally she went to the god of wisdom, Enki. And Enki agreed to help. And so he fashioned supernatural beings that were to pass through the gates easily, for they were not of this world, and they were carrying the waters of life and the food of life. And they were instructed to receive Inanna. And so they flew through each gate all the way down to the underworld and arrived in the darkness with Ereshkigal, moaning, "Oh, my insides, she would say. And these supernatural beings would say, "Oh, your insides, your insides. Oh, my outsides, Oh, your outsides, they would say. And they would dab her neck with cool water, and they would relieve her suffering in as many ways as they could imagine. And when she was complete, she rose and she said, "Who is this that should console me in this dark time? Who are you?" And they replied that they were supernatural beings sent to witness. And Ereshkigal was overcome. She said, "You may have anything you like." And they looked over at the wall where Inanna was still hanging suspended. And they said, "We wish for Inanna." And Ereshkigal said, "That is not Inanna, that is the corpse of Inanna." And they said, "But still, this is what we desire." And Ereshkigal granted their wish. She lifted Inanna off of the meat hook, lay her down, and those two supernatural beings gave Inanna the water of life and the food of life, and she rose. Imagine such a thing, to be reborn in the underworld. And so, naked and perhaps a bit confused, Inanna begins her ascent. She passes by each gate, looking at the items that she had left there and wondering, should I take this? Would I use it? Is it still mine? And so she wanders back up into the world that she once knew, but everything looks a little different. She feels a little different. And she wonders, is she still Queen of Heaven and Earth? Is she still welcome in all the lands and by all people? And in that moment, she wonders, who will I be now? And that concludes this section of the myth of Inanna, the descent of Inanna. There's much more after that, but this is the part of the story that takes you right into that deep belly of the descent and the darkness. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope that this is as much medicine for you as it has been for me. A few things to pay attention to are the parts in the story that fire you up. They either disgust you or repulse you, or they make you excited. Maybe they make you anxious. Those are the places that I would get curious about and start to spend some time with. If you have any questions or curiosities, please feel free to reach out. And fear not if you feel you are in a dark space. There are surely supernatural beings on their way to help you.